Katie, how are you?
Hey, how are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here.
That's awesome. And where are you joining from?
Right now, I am sitting in my home in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. How is the weather? I heard like even all the southern quote unquote states are getting cold weather these days.
I think our low last night was about 4 degrees. So yeah, we're getting very cold weather. We had snow this last week,
That's
about 4 inches.
that's wild. I bet you thought you would get a break from that from moving from Colorado to Tennessee.
Yeah, we actually know how to deal with it. It seems like no one else here really knows how to deal with it.
I believe that. When I went from growing up in Pennsylvania to college in North Carolina, they said I remember our RAs telling us, don't drive down here if it's icy because we have a different kind of ice in the South that you're not used to. And it's like,
Yep.
are there two kinds of ice? And it was really just that they don't salt the roads. So it was like unsalted ice, which is different than salted ice.
It definitely is. We had a gentleman ask how to shovel his driveway. And so my husband told him, just, push it over onto the grass or into the road. And he shoveled it all and piled it up on the sidewalk. So when we walked our dogs for the next week, there was a big pile of snow we had to navigate around. So yeah, it's a learning experience for everyone, I guess.
That is wild. I just saw a video of a guy taking a huge roll of plastic, like the heavy duty plastic, and putting it on his driveway. And then after it snowed, he just peels it off with all the snow on it. Genius.
Oh, that's classic.
Right?
Yeah, you couldn't do that with a foot of snow, but you can do that with a couple of inches.
Yeah. And he just like slowly peeled it back to a completely pristine driveway. And I was like, I can't believe we never thought of that.
Maybe that's a new business model for us, is to create driveway tarps that are easily rolled up or
Yes.
dusted off.
Yeah. And just have people drive around like a service where, like, if you know it's going to snow, they come and like tarp your driveway. And then the next day they come roll it off for you and you're all good to go.
It might even sell in Florida this week.
Right. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
If your teenagers are looking for a very low overhead business, they can go plastic wrap your neighbor's driveways for you.
Yeah. Always looking for new business ideas.
Yeah, it's smart. Well, there's always those entrepreneurial kids that are like, I want some money to go, go out to the movie or
Yep.
do whatever, and like they mow lawns and yeah, like plastic wrapping driveways sounds like a really easy job that people would pay a lot of money for because it saves hours of people's time.
Hmm.
So yeah, there you go, kids. You're welcome.
We'll take a royalty payment, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, like tag me when you start making money on
Yeah.
your plastic driveway. We had a neighbor growing up that was really fancy and they had um like a cobblestone driveway put in that was heated underneath. So they would just flip a switch when it snowed and they were like the only house in the neighborhood that had no snow on their driveway. And I was always like, these people are amazing.
Yeah, but think of all the workouts they missed out on shoveling.
Exactly. Yeah, we had a really long driveway growing up. And so it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yep.
That's wild. Okay, so tell me about Tennessee.
So we've lived in Tennessee now for almost 2 years. It was actually Martin Luther King Day that weekend, Martin Luther King weekend, I should say, 2023, when we came out here and found our house.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, it's pretty amazing when we think about it. Moved from Colorado, which we miss desperately, but we're really enjoying our time in Tennessee.
That's great. And what would your pitch be to someone who wanted to relocate to Tennessee?
The cost of living is definitely a lot lower.
Yeah.
No state income tax,
Wow, okay.
which is a big bonus. Yeah, a very big bonus.
That is.
The people are incredibly friendly,
Uh,
and um, you can start talking to someone and they'll talk to you, it seems like forever, which to some people is good, to others it's not. But it's probably one of the friendliest states that I've been in, and it's green and lush. It's a little humid in the summer, but so far we haven't experienced anything too horrific.
okay, that's not bad. When I was in college, we used to go to, I was on the club rowing team, and we would go to a regatta in Knoxville, Tennessee, um, at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And we just always had beautiful weather. There was a huge regatta, so a ton of schools would come. It was like a really big deal. And I loved the Rocky Top song, so I'd sing that song whenever they played it. And I always just thought Tennessee was like the most beautiful state to drive through.
It's a pretty great place. We had always talked if we ever left Colorado, where might we go? And Tennessee was one of two places.
That's awesome. What was the other one?
North Carolina.
Love North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Would you do like, would you have done the Research Triangle area?
I probably.
Yeah.
I went to grad school in at Duke,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so I'd lived there previously. And
Okay.
so that was one of the areas that we had seriously looked at. But I have family in Tennessee, so that's why Tennessee won out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so tell everyone what you do. Imagine people have no idea what government pricing is. Tell everyone what you do.
So I like to tell people that I help the bad guys do the right thing. Uh, a lot of people don't like pharmaceutical companies. At least, during COVID, everyone was pro pharma, but
Yeah,
before that and after that, a lot of companies don't like, or a lot of people don't like pharma companies. They think we rape and pillage the lands, and there are some out there that probably are doing that. But participate in Medicaid and Medicare and all of the federal health care programs. Pharmaceutical companies have to do certain monthly and quarterly reporting requirements. And so I help them with those requirements. So I help them get their products to people who can't afford it or are disadvantaged in some way. And it's usually at a discounted price.
that's awesome.
For me, it's the perfect intersection of public policy, which is what my graduate degree is in, finance, which is my undergraduate, and legal, which I always wanted to go to law school and just never got around to it. So it's a really interesting mix of those three areas and how companies, private companies, not private companies, but just companies in general, how they respond to public policy. How do they respond in a way that is still good for their business, good for their shareholders, compliant with the legal requirements, and still get their products to the people that need them?
Totally. Yeah, it was interesting. I think I was at a GP conference probably at least 10 years ago, but the keynote speaker was Michael Steele, who at one point had been the head of the RNC. And
Right.
I know they told him that it was like a Medicaid conference, and he was sort of talking about Medicaid, and he was like, you guys are great, and you help all these people that need coverage, and it was kind of from the way he was talking, like you knew that he didn't really know exactly what we did. Like maybe we were more involved on the government side versus the pharma, like complying from the pharma side with the government regulations. But it was interesting because it did make me think that indirectly we are supporting these programs that are these really vital programs. So I was like, maybe we are doing kind of like a good job here.
I believe that it really is important. And I was a Peace Corps volunteer many, many moons ago. And so I have that kind of social work, helping others mentality about me. And so if it was just all about the almighty dollar, I would never be able to do it. Even though I'm a finance person, there has to be a reason for it. One of the first pharma companies that I worked for, I was in finance, and it was when I first started doing government pricing. And we received this letter from a lady with a picture of what turned out to be her nephew, who was probably 8 years old. And he's in a hospital gown with the IV pole next to him, loving on a therapy dog. And she said, "Thank you, because the drug that y'all have just recently brought to market probably saved my nephew's life."
Oh my gosh.
And that stuck with me ever since. That what we do, whether it's government pricing, regulatory, sales, IT, the pharma industry as a whole is about saving lives and making quality of life better.
Right.
And that's an important thing, I think.
It
And
is.
so when people say, "Oh, it's too expensive," well, uh, there was an ad from, I think it was from GSK many years ago, that used to say, "Today's medicines fund tomorrow's discoveries." And so whenever I complain about the price of medicines, I always try and remember that this is helping discover tomorrow's, you know, maybe cure for cancer.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a tough industry because there is a lot of understandable backlash, and there's a lot of people have a lot of feelings about quote unquote big pharma. But then,
Mhm.
there are so many life-saving treatments and life-improving treatments and more coming down the pipeline every day. So it is, it's one of those things. I think people are entitled to their own feelings and whether or not, there are people that don't want to take any medicine, but there are a lot of people who, if you get cancer, you want your cancer treated, understandably. Like, whether or not it gives you complete remission. When I was working at Celgene, which is now part of Bristol Myers Squibb, we had a product for pancreatic cancer that gave people 4 extra months, which doesn't sound like a lot of time. But for something like pancreatic cancer, which is usually a death sentence within a few months, it was like sometimes you were giving these people twice as much time before they got to the end of their life. And that was so valuable to people just to like spend time with their families, get their affairs in order, do a couple more things that they wanted to do off of their bucket list.
Absolutely. I always say I wouldn't want a life without, acetaminophen and chemotherapy and penicillin. It just those three can, even if you take out the chemotherapy, just basic antibiotics and pain
Yeah,
meds, just for that, killer headache.
right.
I wouldn't want, I wouldn't want to live in a world without that. I take both of those, plenty often.
Right. And being in such a highly regulated industry where you know that when you buy a product, whether it's picking up a prescription or off the shelf, that it's safe. You know that it has been tested. There's nothing in it that isn't supposed to be in it versus some supplements that are not regulated where they're saying that it has all the vitamins in it that it says, but maybe it doesn't because nobody's testing it. Or maybe, used to work with a company that had the Centrum brand of vitamins, and they had everything in them that they said, but the big, thick, like horse pill vitamins, they were saying they don't even actually always digest with people because
Yeah.
they're so dense. And with some of the vitamins, like there's nothing requiring them to break down a certain way. They just have to contain what they say they contain.
That's what's funny is so many people are anti-medicine, but will say, "Oh, but I do a lot of supplements." Like you said, we don't really know what's in supplements.
No, we don't.
And there are a lot of reputable companies out there that sell good supplements. And I've taken them on and off throughout the years myself, but it's not a regulated industry today. And so it really can cause problems you don't even recognize.
Yeah. And I think that is part of the problem is that there's just so much information out there and like people don't really know what to trust. So it's like you make your best faith attempt to do what you think is healthy, but maybe we find out in 5 years that it was the wrong thing to do. We don't know.
Right, right.
So, what would you tell someone who was considering getting into the pharma space, whether it was in-house at a pharma company, anything from manufacturing to sales to finance versus kind of what we have done and what you still do, or you're on the consulting side of, working specifically with government pricing and being the liaison to these federal and state government entities.
So I think it's an amazing industry. I've spoken to a handful of people in the last couple of years about it because I do think it's an opportunity for growth. You'll hear about layoffs in pharma, but usually it's associated with acquisitions or maybe one of the really big companies downsizing because they've just become so massive, usually through acquisitions.
Right.
And it's, 6 months or a year later that they're figuring out they probably have too many people. But I think it's an interesting industry um, that has a fair amount of job security. Despite some of those layoffs, you don't hear about, big massive layoffs and companies going bankrupt like you would a lot of other industries. And I think one of the interesting things for me with what I do is I get to touch every part of that. I'm involved with regulatory, clinical, sales and marketing, IT, finance, commercial activities, all of that. And so I'm lucky that I get to touch a little bit of all of it. I've started out in finance helping do global budgets. And so I learned a lot about the industry that way and the different departments and what they do. And I was able to take that information. And when government pricing just kind of landed in my lap, which is usually how it happens, it brought those pieces together for me even more so.
Right. And do you think it's important to take like a lateral move type of switch where, you have a chance to maybe stay and get promoted in a year or two, but you have an opportunity today to learn something completely different and maybe it delays your promotion, but you learn something new?
I've always been more of a risk taker, and the opportunity to learn something new and to apply my skill set in a whole new way and maybe shine even more and have that long-term growth opportunity to me was always the bigger carrot for me. Um, I've never stayed on a job longer than 2.5 years, except working for myself until this current employer. And I'm right at that 2.5 year mark. And so we're all celebrating right now. Um, but I get bored very easily.
Yeah,
And so being able, doing something like consulting where you can really touch a lot of different things works for me. I remember the first day getting back to my hotel after I was at a client site about consulting. The very first day I got back to my hotel room and I called my dad and I said, I finally know what I was born to do. And that was 15 years ago. And so it only took me, 40 some odd years to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up.
that's awesome.
Some people might say it took me that many years to grow up. Um,
I'm working on it
but
still.
yeah, and now I'm like, yeah, I think I'll start going backwards. Um, but it really, the opportunities are there if you are open to risk. And if you're adverse to risk, then don't do it.
Yeah,
You know,
just head
people
down,
need to be,
stay where you are.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And that's not a bad thing. I always say we need people who, want to process accounts payable and pay the same bills every month. We need those people.
right.
I couldn't do that for long. And so that's why I've bounced around a lot and why this has been an area that I really do love is it's given me that variety. But recognizing what drives you, motivates you, and gives you that comfort and sense of safety that you need is important as well.
That's great. And so with your current role at the pricing group, what do you think has kept you there for up to your sort of top limit of so far being with a job?
It's a mix of things for me. First and foremost is my leadership. My bosses are second to none,
Oh,
and that that has been rare at times in my career, and it really does mean a lot. And for anyone who's on the fence about a job or switching industries or anything, I would say find find a boss who will mentor you, let you grow, is not afraid of your abilities. My bosses have let me run the show for the most part. And so it's like having my own company without having some of the risk involved of having my own company. The work itself with clients is what I love to do. And so I work with companies that are just launching their first product and don't even know how to spell GP. I work with companies that are going through massive turnover, layoffs, big change within the organization and really need someone to come in and help guide the ship in this area until they can get their ducks in a row again. Um, Working with the attorneys in the space, I enjoy because they bring a different slant to things.
True.
whereas the operational is a whole different perspective, and finding that balance between the legal and the operational is always tricky. And that's how I feel like consultants really can shine, is helping balance those two.
Right.
Um, and I have a rock star team. It's my second rock star team that I've had. You were part of the first one,
Yeah.
and I've got a second one that is shines in their own way. And so we've been very lucky that we're a very supportive, cohesive team with each other.
That's amazing. And I've also observed over the years that you develop such close relationships with your clients who become friends and then they'll become clients again. You know, people move around to different companies, they take on different roles. What would you say is the importance of making those long-term connections with people in your industry?
I was talking with someone today actually who does business, I think, like I do, and like Artia, my parent company, does. And it's about getting to know your client, your coworker, whoever it might be, and not letting the almighty dollar drive those relationships. Had I not developed those, I would not be where I am today. Yeah, I talk, if you ever hear me do training, I talk about the infamous Bill. And yesterday, and I still refer to him as the infamous Bill. He's the gentleman that I first started working with 25 years ago. And he got me into government pricing. He explained to me what a chargeback is, and I fell asleep when he was doing so. There were three of us in the room. It was rather awkward. Um, and so Bill, the infamous Bill, I have worked for him at a couple different companies, and when I've done consulting, he has been my client, and he is still my client to this day.
That's awesome.
And we both have a few more gray hairs, and we've seen a few things we never thought we'd see in the industry, but we both still are very passionate about what we do, and we still have that the compliance and the relationships. We both want to do what's right. We're always going to figure out what's the best way to do what's right, and how do we maintain the relationships with the people that we are in relationship with. How do we maintain that positive energy and respect for one another?
Yeah. And I can attest, I mean, you have been such a friend to me more than a friend. There was a time when we were traveling, doing a kickoff, and I had to go to the emergency room, and you were sitting in the lobby, and the nurses were like, "Is that your mom?" And I was like, "No, but it might as well be." You know, that's the type of relationship that we have. And I mean, you are someone who always can be counted on. You always put your relationships with people over the job. I think not only because it's the right thing to do, but like also, I think that's how business should be done. It should be about doing the right thing all the time, even when you have to take time out of your day or like move your flight. You know, it's just like, and that it's something I always will remember and I think about frequently. Like, just having your support through so many hard things that I've been through in my life has been incredible to me.
Well, thank you. It's always an honor for someone to let you into their life. And so I think you have to treat it with respect. My dad actually was involved in a business relationship where they wanted him to do some very unethical and illegal things. And he walked away from a very powerful position over the ethical concerns. And I remember when it came out in the news, and he emailed me the article, and the first part after he said, "Hi kiddo," or whatever he said, "This is why I can sleep at night." And I was talking about how these other people were going to prison. And I always think, can I look myself in the mirror with what I've done to, to an employee, to a friend, to a client? Can I look myself in the mirror? Can I, openly tell my dad what I had done?
Right?
And if I can, then I probably shouldn't be doing it. That's a pretty good test. I always tell our girls, if you wouldn't want your grandmother to read about it in the front page of the paper, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. Now, I still have to explain what the newspaper is anymore. Uh, you wouldn't want to post it, I guess, on TikTok or Twitter. I guess that's the new way I have to put it.
Right.
But it's the same thing. If you wouldn't want this advertised to your family, especially like to a grandmother, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I mean, yeah, I think that is a great pitch for pharma in general is like there are a lot of really good people who are trying to do the right thing and they believe every day that their purpose is to help people. At one of my recent employers, they came up with a slogan, time is life. They wanted to get things done quickly to get it out to people. Make sure it didn't take 10 or 15 years to get a new product to market. Make sure that it didn't take 100 people to launch a new program. Get things done.
Right. COVID vaccines,
Right.
they may be controversial, but think how fast they were able to be rolled out. Like them or not, a lot of people found them to be critical for interacting with the elderly.
Right.
And, and so from that standpoint, you go, wow, people, time is life.
Right.
And there's a way to do it the right way and to do it efficiently.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and especially this past, since 2020, just living through a once in a lifetime global pandemic that, hadn't happened for 100 years and hopefully doesn't happen for another 100 years. It's just really, it's eye-opening. I recalled at some point when I did my study abroad, we were in Vienna and there was an artist who had done a lot of paintings around the time of like the big flu epidemic that was in the early 1900s. And a lot of people died and his partner died and I think he ended up dying. And I remember seeing all these paintings and thinking, oh, that's really sad, but like that would never happen to us. And then we go through something like this where like so many people were affected.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's not one person in my world who did not lose someone to COVID or did not have a dramatic impact on their job, their life in some form or fashion.
Right. Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, the loneliness was real. If it wasn't a physical issue or a COVID death, it was, extreme isolation, depression, so many factors we don't realize how interdependent we are as a species.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
you,
we learned a lot.
yeah. And you have your mom living near you, right?
I do have my mom living near us. After my dad passed, um, she moved to Arizona for a couple of years and then she decided she wanted to be closer to family. So when we moved from Colorado to Tennessee a couple of years ago, mom said, when do we go? And so we've got her set up independent living and she's doing great, independent. She's very independent, which is wonderful.
That's good. And
Yeah, it's a blessing to still have her.
that's great. And in this day when we have so many people who are juggling a full-time job like you are, and then you also have elderly parents, what advice would you give for people to help juggle all of these different things if you're in the middle of like the complete spectrum of life and family responsibilities? What are the lessons learned that you would give to them?
I'm the first to say I never thought my life would look like it does today. The sandwich generation is real
Mm-hmm.
and it's really hard. Our girls are back in Colorado, so we don't have the day to day interaction with them, which we miss terribly.
Yeah.
Um, Caring for elderly parents is so much different than I ever anticipated. And my mom's very independent, but she's also 85, almost 86 years old now, and so she does need help.
Right.
Um, Finding that balance has been tricky, especially with a demanding job. And you forgot to mention the two dogs.
Of
They're
course.
as demanding. Yeah, the two dogs are as demanding as anyone or anything.
Yes, they don't sound,
Um,
they don't sound like easy dogs. They're rescue dogs.
they're rescue dogs, yeah. So, finding the balance is hard. And I remember years ago, someone said, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once. And so kind of remembering that, these days look different than they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and they look different than they will in 5 or 10 or 20 years. And so appreciating what it does look like today. You know, in 20 years, I'm not going to have my health the way I do today. I'm not going to have my mom in 20 years. I'm not going to have my dogs in 20 years. I don't know if I'll be working. And so really appreciating what I have and remembering, you know, a little attitude of gratitude, which I am the first to admit I forget sometimes, but I think it is important to maintain it.
Right. And how do we get, at times we all get into that triage mode where we feel like all we can do when we get up is just deal with the emergency and maybe not everything else gets done. How do we try to bring ourselves out of that and into more of a mindful state where not everything feels like it's on fire?
Today has been fire drills all day, and so I've been kind of asking myself that question: is what does that look like? And I'm a really good list maker, and I like the accomplishment and sense of accomplishment when I get to mark something off the list. And so what I have found in the last few months with all that a little extra stuff going on in my world, because we also just moved, is I have my big long to-do list that is encompassing of everything that I need to do for work. But then I have a post-it pad with, 8 rows on it, and those are the things that have to get done today. Everything else can wait, and I kind of reevaluate every morning, go, what goes on the post-it? What do I have to worry about? Because as I often tell my employees especially, what we do is not open heart surgery.
Okay.
We we don't have patients with their hearts in our hands. If we don't do it today, there might be a problem, but it's not literally life and death. We work in pharma, but that doesn't mean we're dispensing products to save lives this very minute. And so it's really finding the priorities and recognizing some days just suck and you have to work 15 hours that day. That's just the reality when you're a grown up.
Right.
But also recognizing that if every day is looking like that, then there's something that needs to be adjusted.
Right. I love that advice. And I think for me, I have this fantasy that like every day I'll check off everything on my list and like every day I'll have a discrete to-do list where everything gets done and then the next day it's a completely new list and like it's like every day. And I've been trying to give
Yeah,
myself more grace of like it's almost all of our lists are rolling lists where like maybe you get
yeah.
5 things done today, maybe you get 10 things done today, maybe you get 2 things done one day, but you just still and you get 2 things done and you add 10 things and like that's just how it goes sometimes.
That's been my to-do list for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just, every 2 to 5 business days, I just totally write a new list because the other one has gotten scratched on and additions and the size and the margins and I have different colored pens now to indicate what really has to happen. And that's when I finally just said, you just need to go to a post-it because if it doesn't fit on the post-it, it's not going to happen on that day. It's not. There's just no way.
I love that. Realism. It's important.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I've kept you a little longer than you said you had, so thank you so much. I know you're really busy. I love talking with you, and I really appreciate you sharing this wisdom. And I hope to see you in person one of these days.
Thank you, Dana. I love talking to you.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.